is from Mark, where indeed we learn that shroud has been destroyed, that shroud of death. Starting Mark chapter 16, verses 1 through 8. And we're going to tell this through a colleague of mine, put together the reading of this from people of all ages across the country to remind ourselves that this story is just for us here, isn't for just people back then, 2,000 years ago, but it continues to be told on this day throughout the world. Let us hear and listen for the living word.
This is the story of God for the people of God.
Okay, quiet on the set.
When the Sabbath was over,
Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought spices,
so that they might go and anoint him.
And very early, on the first day of the week,
when the sun had risen,
they went to the tomb.
They had been saying to one another,
"Who will roll away the stone from us, from the entrance to the tomb?"
When they looked up, they saw that the stone,
which was very large,
it was huge!
Seriously, it was huge.
Had already been rolled back.
As they entered the tomb,
they saw a young man
dressed in a white robe,
sitting on the right side.
And they were alarmed. But he said to them,
"Do not be alarmed.
You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified.
He has been raised.
He's not here.
Look, there's the place they laid him.
But go.
Go! Go!
Go!
Go! Go and tell.
Tell his disciples and Peter
that he is going ahead of you to Galilee.
There you will see him.
Just as he told you.
Just as he told you!
So they went out and fled from the tomb.
For terror and amazement had seized them.
And they said nothing to anyone, because they were afraid. Now go!
Go! Go!
Go!
Go! It's Easter, a time we remember that tomb was empty, and they were told to go. Go and tell people. And yet they were afraid, and they didn't tell anybody at first. Well, these days, 2,000 years later, we have no shortage of people trying to tell people it's Easter. First of all, you have TV, and you can turn it on. You can see every year there seems to be a new telling of the story, a new Jesus story on a TV at this time of year. And of course, every year we also get Charlton Heston as Moses, and we can watch that. But we also, if you're on social media, if you open up a paper, or if you're anywhere, you'll see banners around town of new ways of people trying to get people's attention about Easter. I've seen the greatest comeback story ever told, or Jesus, he's got your back. I don't know what that has to do with Easter. I even saw some ones that made me just go, like Jesus, he nailed it. So it was an actual one. And people trying to get people's attention about Easter. So we have been using wake up. Wake up. Now, wake up isn't the most friendly thing to say. In fact, the most times we hear somebody say wake up, our first thoughts back to them aren't very friendly. I know even with my cute little 4-year-old son's face 2 inches from mine saying wake up, I, as cute as he is, don't have the friendliest thoughts at first. Wake up, Daddy, there's a bug in my room. Wake up is usually said to us because we're snoozing and we're sleeping and we need to sleep and our bodies are recharging and we like being comfy in our beds asleep, and it's so much better to be woken up naturally if we can, although often it's a voice or an annoying alarm clock saying, wake up, it's time to go, you've got things to do. And even if we know they're important to do and that we need to do them, hearing wake up isn't usually received with the most joy. And sometimes even if we're not asleep, people tell us to wake up. I grew up in Berkeley. I heard all the time, wake up, man, to the government and what they're doing to you. Or there are some serious things that we hear people saying, wake up to what's going on with the climate. Wake up to what's going on with money's influence in politics. Wake up to what's going on in the world. Don't just be asleep. We don't always like hearing that either, because one, it's kind of a judgmental thing to say to us, like we're not aware that something's going on or that we're not doing enough about it. Well, I don't know if Mary Magdalene or Mary, Jesus' mother, or Salome had slept at all that night. It was after the Sabbath, the second night after Jesus had died. They had to wait until sunrise before they could go to the tomb to be able to see and be able to anoint the body, and they had to buy those spices after the Sabbath. And so I don't know, between buying those spices and that sunrise, whether they slept at all. I imagine they were replaying all the events that had happened since Friday, since Jesus was arrested and crucified. Maybe they slept a while because of their bodies give in, and they slept, and then the sun rises and they wake up. And what we celebrate today is what they were waking up to. What we wonder about today is what just were they waking up to? What has changed in the world? Well, William McLaughlin is a historian that Diana Butler Bass, a church historian herself and leader and speaker and author, has talked about as well. Writes in a book called Revivals, Awakenings, and Reforms about our country's different awakenings and then revivals and the differences between the two and how they have led reforms in our country. Awakenings were more of a fundamental shift in the way people approached life and saw things, while revivals were what people went back to. Revivals were calling people back to church, back to the old-time religion, back to the fundamentals, back to the past, to the things that they knew once worked. And if we just went back and we revived those things that were dying, that were on death's door, that maybe things would be better. Revivals led people to go back to church, led to new churches being created, and were quite successful in sometimes. They also led to things like, and influenced things happening like prohibition. Revivals caused change and reform in some ways. Usually those reforms didn't last, though, because, as McLaughlin points out, awakenings were happening that were much deeper and more changing than revivals. Awakenings is the raising up of some sleeping part of our collective human conscience. Awakenings is something that changes the way we view everything. Things from family to community to organization to religion and identity itself. Awakenings often are fought and resisted. And so we have counter-awakenings. He says that there was the progressive awakening during the 18th century, 1800s, and during that time there also existed a counter-awakening coming up against the progressive thoughts of those times. That was evidenced by this surge in the activity and membership of the Ku Klux Klan. A counter-awakening to the progressive thoughts of that time. And yet, though counter-awakenings ebbed away, then completely died, but shrank, and the awakening continued. We sometimes resist being woken up, being awakened to something new because it's hard, because it's scary, because it terrifies us, and we just want to go home like Mary and hide. We struggle and we fight it. We hit the snooze button, sometimes for decades at a time. He says we're in a current awakening that started in the 1960s, but its counter-awakening were the 1980s, hitting the snooze button. And yet we see people being woken up to things, even now, to equality and justice. Around the world, people rising up, calling for their voices to be heard. Well, what does Easter mean in this context then of cycles of awakenings and revivals? Well, it can be different things. Is Easter a revival? Is Easter a time where we call people to go back to the old religion, go back to the old beliefs, to the ways that we used to believe? In this Pacific Northwest, where 30% of the population check none on religious affiliation, or do we call people back to religion and belief and to get back into the churches and revive them again? Or do we let certain things and recognize that certain things will not come back and be revived? That what is dying or decaying or what is lost its relevance is indeed not needing to be revived. In celebrating resurrection, are we pouring our hopes into what is fading? Or are we celebrating a new awakening? A time to wake up. Resurrection as awakening rather than bringing back what was, looking for the way that what used to be can be reborn into something entirely new, something deeper and bigger that will continue to change lives. In Easter, do we say, wake up? There's a completely new reality to rise to, just as Mary and Jesus' mother and Salome woke up to. That there is this thing that was slumbering within humanity that has been unleashed. A power beyond anything we can imagine. Something that is good. Something that is rising and wants to rise within us and say to us, wake up to what is new. The women approach the tomb, and have they woken up? They don't seem to understand that something is different, that they're not going to go back and when they see Jesus, it's not the same Jesus. It's not Jesus is going to say, okay, well, that was a heck of a weekend. Let's get back to work. Go travel around and continue to do things the way we were doing them. That's not what Jesus does. Jesus is not revived. Jesus has been awakened. Jesus has been raised into something new, and is calling to them a new reality. Jesus exists in a new way, fully awake, with his message to us to be awake to who you are, to what God wants you to be, to wake up that image of God within us, to wake up that redeemed and new creation that we have become in resurrection, to wake up to the reign and realm of God that God would like us to live and know. I think God is in every awakening that we've seen in our nation. That God is the force and the engine in every awakening that we see in the world. Because God really loves us, loves humanity. God has chosen to make flesh and blood the place where God lives and breathes. That is the message of Christ, that God would not call us to some other world, but live with us here and now and through us. It's such a positive and optimistic message. It's a wonder to me how so many religions become judgmental and condemning of humanity. Because God creates us, God makes us in God's image, God redeems us, heals us, forgives us, empowers us, resurrects the Spirit of God within us. And it cannot be killed. This is how God chooses to live. Waking up is hard. We want to revive old habits or ways of being and thinking. We sometimes have a hard time facing the new or facing what is happening in our lives or in the world. And some things are difficult to have any hope about. Maybe we're terrified about what God is calling us to. And we don't want to tell anybody, and we want to hide like those first witnesses. Terrified of who we're called to be, who we really are, of the power that God has placed in us. Sometimes we don't want to wake up. But think about those times when you were just anxious for that new day. Maybe it was your wedding day. For kids, it's Christmas morning every year, right? You don't mind being told, wake up then. In fact, you probably hardly slept at all. Maybe it's the first day of a great trip that you have planned or a new job that you're really excited about. You don't mind being told, wake up, then you're excited for that new reality. And so too, what God has in store for us is something that should shake us and shake the world. Rise up, wake up to what God wants in this world, a world of justice. And yes, God is in the call for justice for all people in this world, whether they're gay or straight, whatever ethnicity they are or where they're from. God is in the call and the waking up for justice and equality for all. And yes, God is in the call for peace and working for peace in this world. And yes, there are things moving against those things. There are revivals trying to call us away from those things. There are people who think that God isn't in it at all. But God is waking us up to justice, peace, and truth. That is resurrection. A call to stand in the midst of this world and say, wake up. And we do have a choice, revival or awakening. Hope that what once was will somehow be revived, or open our eyes to what God is already doing. Waking us up with a new reality, one where all people know that they are loved and created, where they are redeemed and forgiven, where they are called to peace, justice, community. Do you lack the faith in what you are and what you can do? Wake up to the God who desires to dwell in you and the power of even the smallest act of faith to make a difference. Are you worried you'll get it wrong? Wake up to the vast grace that God gives you to fall on your face and get back up time and time again. Are you worried or are you feeling defeated by health or by relationships, by inner struggles? Well, you're not alone. Wake up to the community that's willing to walk with you and be with you in your challenges. Wake up. It's a new day. And just as Jesus told Mary and his mother and Salome, go and tell the world with actions and deeds. Wake up! Wake up! Christ is risen.
Yes, Christ is risen indeed.
Amen.